Hello, welcome back to the Starting Story podcast with your host, Krishna Palmer. Thank you for being here. Here we talk to entrepreneurs and business leaders around the world about how they started their journey and the story of how they got to where they are right now. Today's guest is Julee Sung. She's the author of the Thrive and Shine book. It's all about igniting your career journey with confidence and grace. She's had a dynamic career trajectory that has gone through various industries and roles. After COVID and through her experiences, Julee learned to succeed authentically while maintaining her identity. Now she writes, coaches, and speaks to guide early career professionals and leaders in navigating their journey with resilience and purpose so that they can make sure they stay true to themselves during this hustle period. Thank you so much for being here to listen in with me today. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Now, let's cut to me talking with Julee about her starting story. Julee, thank you so much for coming on to the Starting Story podcast. It means a lot, calling all the way from Los Angeles. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Krishna. It's great to see you, and thank you so much for having me today.
No worries. Great to see you as well. So your story, as I said at the intro, it's really about, what really stood out to me was the whole kind of staying true to yourself, which is something so refreshing to hear because as anyone who's run a business knows, you kind of almost end up not doing that. You end up almost falling into the pit of like being really harsh on yourself because you need to live up to this expectation of what it is to run a business and be an entrepreneur, those big words, right? So do you want to kind of start off by just giving like a quick intro to, who you are, what you do, and why you feel like being authentic to yourself is so important?
Yes, absolutely. When I started out in the working world, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a music major at university. I had no plans of joining the corporate world. I was all down the path of academia, started in academia, and no respect to academians out there, but for me, it was just not my cup of tea, to say the least. I just didn't fit in with the structure or the culture. So I thought, you know what, before I finish grad school, which I never did, let's take a year off. I'll make some money and figure it out. And so I jumped into an assistant job at a big company that was really the only job that I was sort of qualified for at the time, and then just took to it like duck to water. And then many years to follow, many jobs later, I really thought I was a company girl. I'm going to land in this company, retire from here, and this is my path. And what I found, and now in retrospect, I realize I never really was a corporate person. There are lots of things that I enjoyed about it. I obviously was very rewarded for it because I was in this upward trajectory, got promoted, went all the way up to executive leadership positions. But it always felt like I was wearing a uniform of some kind. And even though I found parts of my career very, very fulfilling and rewarding, particularly working with the more staff, younger professionals entering into the world and mentoring them and watching them grow and helping them build their careers. The whole thing felt a little bit like I was wearing somebody else's jacket, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes the pivots that you have are from external forces. You're kind of forced to make the pivots because you don't take the leap yourself. It's actually very difficult to say, you know what, I'm in this cushy job, I have this nice career, but there are parts of me that feels unfulfilled, so I'm just going to dive to the whole left field. It's very difficult to do that. What happened was for me during COVID, there was a lot of time of uncertainty. A lot of people were getting laid off, including my boss and including my position. I had a 6-month window of, hey, I think we're going to eliminate this department, basically. Wow. But here's a nice little lead time. And I thought, I could go work my corporate network, find another job, do my, kind of stint that I know how to do? Or is this a real opportunity as the world is completely transforming around us for me to do something really brave? And it was frightening and scary. I never thought I would be on my own I didn't even use the word entrepreneur then. I was using the word freelancer, consultant, things like that. But the mental click of, let's try this. If I don't do it now, when will I ever do it, really kicked in. And of course, the environment was pretty extreme with COVID going on. But, for me, it was that external push that I needed to say, what do I really want to try? There's no guarantee that this will work.
Yeah.
But I felt like if I have to look back on what I know, I can always do that. But this is an opportunity for me to try something. My advice is the best way to try something is start as close to your comfort zone as possible, because you are pushing outside of it. So for me, I started as a consultant, freelancing in sales, marketing, operations, because that's the world I was coming from. And then slowly started to build my practice around developing leaders, coaching. So it wasn't a super cutoff, like, hey, I'm flipping the switch and I'm cutting this off and going this other direction. So that helped in terms of having a little bit of a runway. But I think the whole idea of authenticity is, how are you serving yourself? What actually feels good to you? What feels good to you in your job might be 20% of what you're doing. How can you lean into that, expand it, and maybe explore ways of growing that so it's more like 50%, 70%, 80%. I think it is a fallacy to tell people that you'll get to 100%, because you never will.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing something that you really love, as I am, there's always that at least 20% that you don't want to deal with, invoicing and accounting and taxes,
Exactly.
all those kinds of things. But if you're getting to a point where the majority of your time and energy is spent on something you find motivating and worthwhile and valuable, even if every day isn't, even if you have hard days, crummy days, that's okay. That's what you want to strive towards. You don't get there overnight. You have to build to it. But I think this whole idea of authenticity at the workplace starts with, what do I need to serve myself? What am I not in touch with that maybe I can tap into a little bit?
I think you mentioned a good point, which was that when you are starting something new, try to do it as close to your comfort zone as possible, because you are breaking it. I feel like that in itself can be a quote right there, because it's so true. When you've already decided that you're going to do something completely different in terms of running yourself, the last thing you want is to make what you're actually doing so different that it becomes difficult to operate, because that's where you will then start thinking, is this really for me? This is way too difficult. For me to teach others, I'm having to learn myself, kind of thing. So what you did was kind of a natural step, which was you've gained that experience in your jobs when you were an employee, and you're just trying to give it to other people to help them out, right? And anyone, I heard somewhere that like anyone, wherever you are in whatever position, you always have some kind of information that someone else wants to learn from.
Yes.
And it's just about how can you package that in a way that people find interesting and they can actually learn from it, because ultimately that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to make other people educated. So when you first, you're kind of the transition from you getting given the ultimatum that you're probably going to get laid off now, it's COVID, we're struggling. And then you may be also realizing at the same time that even if you were to try and get another job, every other company is also laying off. There's not really anyone hiring anymore.
That's right.
So it's like, even I've been laid off and I also can't get a job, which is the same problem that thousands of people around the world were, in a problem with. What was the things going through your head when you were like, I'm stuck, what can I do? And then what was the kind of the thought process when you thought, maybe I should start doing this kind of freelance work on the side?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It was such a dark time in so many aspects. And if you were an employee at a company, and it's funny to think back, because a lot of companies actually grew like gangbusters during the pandemic, but those are the ones in the news that we hear about. A lot of companies actually didn't. There was so much turmoil and uncertainty. And if there's one thing business doesn't like, it's uncertainty, of course. And I thought, the first thing you do is your survival instincts start kicking in, right? Like you start doing the math, you start looking at your bank account, how long I live on this, whatever, piddly amount is in my account if I really were to get laid off in 6 months. So you start doing all these practical things. And then for me, I sat back and I took a breath and said, look, there's nothing I can do to control this. What are some practical things that I have to plan for and put into motion now? And what are some things that I can be more aspirational about, that I can maybe either start now or plan for and start building towards? So I really created two lists. One was very practical. I have rent to pay, I have bills to pay, I have food to put on the table. What do I need to do that? What is going to help me get that need taken care of and serve those personal needs? I think, if you're one of the very exceeding rare few who don't have to work for a living, this list won't apply to you.
Yeah.
But I think for the rest of the population, you do have to think about those practical things. I don't want people to shy away from that. I think a lot of times when people are starting out and you hear success stories, it's almost like it just happened. They had no financial pressures. They just went to work and it all just came. And that's actually not the reality. So you do have to plan for those things. Looking at the practical list, I thought, okay, I could either get my resume out there and try to get a permanent job, which every instinct in me was like, I don't want to do that right now. Or I could say, how do I take my skills and turn it into something that can be paid for? And that's where I started putting together consulting packages for people who needed sales, marketing, or operations. And I thought, if people are being laid off, that's horrible, but the work still needs to be done. They just don't want to pay for it, they being the companies. So maybe pay for a freelancer instead of a full-time, fully burdened employee in terms of cost. So I started putting packages together and pricing it out, tapping into my network and saying, are you going to need supplemental help here? And that was a very practical path that would ensure that I still had a roof over my head and still could, fulfill my basic needs. The more aspirational side, I said, okay, what are the type of companies I would ideally like to work with? Who are the type of people I would like to contact first? Of course, when you're first starting out, you can't be as choosy. You need to kind of take the work that comes
Anything
in.
that comes, yeah.
Yeah, you need to hustle for it more. But that, again, was a more aspirational list. Hey, I'd like to work with companies where I have room to expand my services into other areas, more like developing or coaching. I'd like to work with people whom I know or get introduced by a mutual trusted contact that I know are good people. I don't want to dive into some horrible culture and avoid it, things like that. And again, that was a little bit more aspirational, but having that list there as a guiding light, basically, and saying, as I get more work, and if I'm ever in the most fortunate position to have to choose between projects, I know what my priorities are going to be. So starting with the two lists really gave me some fences and parameters that I can work with. Because I think when you have the vast unknown, making things as actionable as possible and giving yourself some tasks you can be accountable for is really important, because you need structure in order to know that, hey, I'm executing on these things, I'm checking things off my list, and that keeps you moving forward rather than just sitting there and contemplating and pontificating all day long, which can happen if you're building something new.
That's true. It's when you have no element of structure anyways, when something like COVID has happened where you have no control, finding the small ways where you can kind of structure your life, kind of give yourself an objective to attain towards, is all you need to kind of have a direction, right? So you kind of had those two lists. You had that one list, which was more of a financial thing, which is about, okay, where can my funds be reduced? What kind of funds can I have? Do I have no control, like rent I have no control of, stuff like this. But where can I cut down maybe? And very realistically, how much is this going to last me? Like, how much of a problem am I in? And then the second list was about, okay, if I have decided to kind of take things in my own stead, I'm going to help people on my own. What kind of people do I want to work with? What kind of business do I want to work with? How do I want those people to approach me? Kind of almost setting your goals beforehand. And of course, you're so right in saying that when you're starting off new, you kind of just take anything as it comes. And you really just do whatever and, anything and everything. But at least having those goals means, as you said yourself, that if two things came to you, you knew which one was going to align a bit more, so you'd lean towards that one a bit more. And all these little things, you know, when you're powerless, at least it gives you this feeling of like, I have some control over something, you know, which is all you need.
Yeah. That's right. And I think it goes back to the authenticity question that we started off with, which is a lot of people approach authenticity or being true to yourself as all or nothing, right? And it's never all or nothing. I think being authentic to yourself starts with who you are at your core, staying grounded, having that list in your mind mentally of this is what I'm working towards, and not feeling like, oh, I had to compromise this. I had to work with a culture I didn't like or do a job that wasn't exciting. And now I've strayed away. You really haven't. You know, you're just serving yourself by meeting your practical basic needs. It doesn't mean you're not being authentic. It just means it's a work in progress. You're working towards your more aspirational goals. I think we're so bombarded with images of people who have it, you know, and they're the Tony Robbins, the, you know, Mel Robbins, the Oprahs of the world. And we think that's what being authentic is. But in reality, if you're working towards your goals and objectives and you're shaping yourself and working on yourself and pouring energies on a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis, that is being authentic to yourself. So I would say, you know, have some grace, give yourself some slack, and, you know, don't get discouraged because you have to make a compromise or take a job you didn't want or lose a pitch that you really wanted. That's okay. It's all part of the growing pains.
Yeah. And again, it kind of links to people's definition of success, right? If you keep on comparing yourself to, as you said, you know, the Tony Robbins or the Oprahs of the world, then, you know, their definition of success is completely different to what you might define as success for yourself. You know, I can think of, for example, someone, let's say, who really wants to push themselves to get better at time management might end up purposefully taking on loads of things at once just to see how they can allocate time. Now, for someone else, that might be like, what are you doing? You're stressing yourself out. Why would you do that? But for them, their aim is to improve their time management, so they're purposely stressing themselves out just to see what's going on. They are reaching towards a goal, but for someone else, that's kind of like, I would never do that. Why would you do that to yourself? And it's that perspective change that you just need to realize, what are you reaching towards? And, you know, it's that whole thing of people sometimes say stuff to you. You just need to know that you're true to yourself. So when you started off, this sounds a lot more like you were freelancing, as you said, and you're helping other people. Where did the kind of idea come to you where you should teach people on how to live authentically?
When I was working, I still always felt, regardless of my job title, whether I was an executive assistant or an executive director, I always felt like I was just hustling. You know, I was just hustling, and I white-knuckled it the whole time. And even entering into this freelance / working towards entrepreneurship space, I absolutely felt like that. I just felt like I was hustling this whole time. And once I got to a point where I had some steady projects and really take a breath and was really starting to shape my business and work with people that I wanted to work with, more coaching, more development work was coming in, which was so fortunate and I was so grateful for. That's when I thought, you know, I'm working with all these people there. They were maybe what they call hypos at company, high potential employees that I was getting to coach through my work, or middle management where they felt like, oh, you know, they're kind of ready for more coaching and hopefully grow them to the next level. And I kept looking at them, and my advice that I would hear myself give would be, hey, you know, is this what you really want? This doesn't feel like you know, is this the actual words that you want to communicate? Because what you told me isn't what you put in an email. So I'm doing really tactical things like that. And I'm hearing these words over and over again. And it kept being back to, people are putting on an act almost like they're a character, like, oh, you know, I'm a vice president, so now I'm this character. And then on the flip side, I would hear from the real upper management, you know, senior VP, C-level suite, where the coaching they would get would be, just be an authentic leader. You know, you have to be generous, you have to be genuine. And I thought, you know, why do you have to wait until you're in a big title to be authentic. It actually should be the other way around. You should be authentic from day one so that you build the career that you want and build the work that you want versus feel like I have to hustle and put on an act and put on my uniform, character. And then once I reach the corner office, now I can relax and be my authentic self. It just did not ring true at all. So I kept playing around with that idea. And ultimately that led to this idea of Thrive and Shine, the book. Shine is actually an acronym, and the first letter S is show up authentically. And I thought everyone should do that, because if you don't, you reach a level like middle management, and I saw this time and again, and you're deeply unhappy because the career you've built is so out of line with what you actually wanted and what your principles are and what your values are.
Yeah, it's so much easier to do a job if it aligns with what you think, as opposed to you're aligning it to someone else's confirmation. And what you said is very similar to kind of the normal progression of so many hierarchies in terms of any job, where you work, and then as soon as you get to the top, now that people are listening to you, now you have the power, now you're like, no, I'm going to be me. And it's almost that kind of thing where it's like an unwritten rule, right? No one really challenges that idea, that everyone goes, yeah, you're supposed to work from the ground up. And then it's refreshing to hear that you've got someone like you, Julie, who's going, actually, of course work, no one's saying be complacent, but at least still keep this element of, setting some boundaries, being able to say no to some things because, no, that's just not me, I'm not going to do that. And having your own clear goals set in mind, realizing that, we all know that just because you entered a company at 18 doesn't mean you have to, let's say, retire in the same company. So
that's right.
Whereas obviously the company structure itself is built for that. Like, company structures are built for you to stay in the company, but you yourself, you have your own life. So you might choose, I'm only going to stay here 2 years for the experience and then I'm going to move out. So that just shows like the difference between the company trying to pull you one way, you trying to pull yourself another way. Don't conform to the company, try and conform to yourself.
Yes, exactly. And I think, working with a lot of people who were bright, ambitious, driven in the earlier stage of their career. And now I do work with entrepreneurs as well. And one thing that I notice is they feel like, especially in a company structure, they feel like they don't have control over anything. It's, hey, I can't create a job from nothing. I can't create my promotional path. I'm just dependent on everybody else in the organization. So they feel very powerless. And, it's almost like they're waiting, like, hey, once I get to the next level, I'll be more empowered. And then I'll be even more empowered after that. And I'm saying, yes, of course. I mean, realistically, you don't have a big team. You can't just delegate everything, especially if you're just starting out. But what you do have control over and what you are empowered to do is own your own behavior, own your own output, and really start building your own value that you do have control over. So you don't feel like a rag doll in the wind, just whichever the way wind blows, I just kind of sway there. I show up where they tell me to show up and I just do what they tell me to do. No, you have a mind of your own. You have values that you bring to the table. And of course, especially the more junior position you are in, the more work you have to do that you might not want to do. It's not exciting. No one wants to be a spreadsheet jockey, for example, but that's what an entry-level analyst does. But, the way you interact with people, the kind of network you build, the relationships you cultivate, even if 9 to 5 your day job is kind of boring, all of that is still valuable, and that will serve you all the way throughout your career. And you do have control over those things, how you interact and communicate with people, the experience you give yourself on a day-to-day basis, the experience you give others who work with you, that you are empowered in. So don't forget that you already have power, just maybe not the external power that you see others have, but it doesn't mean you're starting from nothing. It doesn't mean you don't bring something to the table.
Amazing. That's such strong words. It just shows like you don't need to, again, it's the same thing. Don't need to rely on someone else's confirmation to kind of validate yourself. Just look for it inwards and change your own perspective on things if you want to see things differently.
That's right.
Now, for this whole, element of telling people, live true to yourself, define success for yourself, you created a book, right? Thrive and Shine.
Mhm.
Where was the idea for
Yeah.
that? Because obviously for teaching, people have all sorts of things. Some people, go to social media. Some people create courses. Some people create mentorship schemes and packages. You created a book. So the book looks very nice. I've not been able to read it, unfortunately, but the book
Thanks.
looks really nice. Where did the idea come from that? And what was the process behind creating such a book?
Yeah. The funny thing is, throughout my career, especially corporate career, and then when I jumped into entrepreneurship, I was either given books to read, because you're part of all these development programs and leadership development programs at companies. And then when you jump out on your own, you feel like I just need to get every education I can. So you're just consuming, all the content you can. And I found they were either very academic, like, hey, I don't want to read a book that gives me a lot of industry stats from 2003. Like, that's not meaningful to me. Not saying that's not great content. It just wasn't speaking to me that much. Or they were very like, get to the next level, how to get promoted, how to be a leader. And I was like, well, that doesn't really fit me either. There were a lot of resources on how to start your own business, but it was what I found. I'm not saying these don't exist, but what I was immediately seeing were how to start a bakery, how to start in retail, these how to start your own shop kind of things. And I was like, that's not what I'm doing either. So all these elements, I was like, I'm looking for a book that doesn't quote any stats. It doesn't rely on data. It just relies on real life stories of lessons learned that are going to be embarrassing, that I can learn from and maybe others can learn from. And I started thinking back on my career because I was using a lot of my own experiences through my coaching for my clients. Like, I remember when I was in your position and I did this, don't do what I did. So the original working title for the book was Do As I Say, Not As I Did. Because I had a wealth of embarrassing experiences that I had to learn from. I thought, if I could save people from even one or two of these same mistakes, wouldn't that be great? So I thought initially I thought maybe I'll create a blog and it's just all my embarrassing stories of my failures at work, big and small. And I thought, that's great, but I don't want to write a memoir. I want something that's helpful for people.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've developed people. People have worked for me. I've worked with other people who are in that early stage of their careers. Maybe I'll write case studies on them. So it very organically came together into this book idea. But my book is 100% real stories. It has prompt questions and some exercises and some suggestions you can try, like keeping a work journal or, different things. Maybe at the end of the week, you do a rosebud thorn exercise, if you know what that is, like what was great, what was not so great but has potential, and what did I bomb at, and so the book is really built to be a practical guidebook, not something academic. There are a lot of resources out there if you want something that's studies based and research based. I think there's real validity to that as well, by the way. So I'm not poo-pooing all those other resources. I just wanted like a complementary guidebook that could sit alongside those other resources to be a little bit more of a well-rounded library.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. This is something I've noticed with myself as well, because I've read kind of some books where it is kind of, first of all, books are just by the nature of them, they can't be updated. You can have editions, but like not all books get editions, right? So you will just have that one book that everyone goes, this is a great read. Like, I think one that everyone says is how to win people and influence others or something like that. It's
Right.
It's a great book, but it's just like all the stats are so old. It's almost like you end up as if you're reading a research paper that's just way too long. And again, like you were saying, I'm not trying to say they're bad, but I just kind of prefer to have a book that's a little bit more story-like, and specifically I like a book that kind of makes me rethink myself, because if I've sat through a book and I've gone, I'm now thinking differently to when I started reading it, I'm like, that was so good. And sometimes, if it's really good, you'll reread it, right? So do you have any kind of part of that book, any particular story, any particular quote of that book that you feel like is really good at maybe reshaping the way people think about living true to themselves?
Yes, I have so many stories where most of my stories that are in the book are the big face plants, like, oh, why did I do that? Because I thought that would be the most useful. Some of the stories in the case study, so each chapter has about 3 case studies, all the names have been changed to protect the guilty. But but all the stories are real. The one thing that I talk about very early on is this concept of time plus occasion, or TPO, which is a phrase that I didn't invent. It's certainly been out there because I think some of the questions I got, particularly from more the young professionals, were, well, if I'm being authentically true to myself, can't I just show up, as all of me? I'm like, yes, of course you could show up as the football fan, the music lover, the stand-up comedy aficionado, whatever. There is a time, place, occasion, and there's this one story that's very harmless that I particularly love, where I was training my replacement, and it was an assistant job. I had just been promoted. This new assistant came in, and she was lovely, smart, bright, capable, all things, much better assistant than I ever was. And for my boss's birthday, she had been at the company for about 6 months at that time. She donned a full costume of Marilyn Monroe wig and dress and everything. And in the break room in front of everyone saying happy birthday, like Marilyn Monroe to JFK style,
Mm-hmm.
which was very cute. I was working at a very conservative investment boutique firm at the time. And while people thought that was a very sweet gesture, it didn't do her any favors in terms of having her show up and, get that professional respect,
Mm.
perhaps. And no one reprimanded her for it because she didn't do anything that was, out of policy or anything like that. But it's such a clear example of, she meant well. She was showing up authentically, but the time, place, occasion was perhaps not the best.
Mm.
So I always want to temper this idea of show up as who you are, be true to yourself, be authentic, with know who you are, know what's appropriate. You are a multifaceted person. Know which side of you to show at what point, and when to push and when not to. So the good news is she stayed at the company and had a very nice career there.
Nice.
She saved her singing for after work happy hour karaoke's after then, because she certainly learned her lesson, and she had a little bit of an embarrassing moment, but thankfully got over it. So it's a bad thing. But I really love that story because it's such a little snippet of what I mean by authenticity versus TPO.
Yeah, and after you mentioned that, I can understand now why there's this balancing act between, someone who goes out and says, be true to yourself, but then someone else who says, stick to the program, or stick to the objectives of who you're working with, or even if you're working for yourself, like let's say you're running a business. I understand at the same time someone who says, no, don't be true to yourself, you're meant to hustle, you're meant to grind, you can be true to yourself in 5 years' time. And it's that balancing act that I think people get stuck in, which is why they need the
Yes.
help of you, Julie, where they're kind of like, I've tried grinding and I feel like I'm losing myself in the process, which can be, kind of a very
Yes.
personal struggle. It can be something that's very difficult, especially if someone's been working so hard for so long, that now to then still feel like you're losing, it's like you're in a losing battle, right?
Right.
And that's something which I feel like, even though it's nice to stay authentic, I feel like teaching it must be difficult, because it's one of those things I've noticed whenever I've spoken to so many, life coaches, therapists on this podcast. And before starting the podcast, I had no idea, but after I've realized just how difficult it must be to teach people how to think. Because you can teach someone academically, you can teach someone, here's an Excel sheet, I'll teach you how to do the formulas. Here's a worksheet, I'll teach you how to format it correctly. But how do you teach someone how to think? How do you teach someone how to learn? It's so difficult because everyone is so different. So kind of as
Yes.
you've gone on this process, even though you came in with that ideology of, I'm going to show people, I'm going to teach people using my stories how to live true to themselves, I'm sure you must have also had your own kind of learning curve in realizing, how do I even start handling people from where they are and taking them to the next level? What was that like?
Yes, it's such a great question, and a very thoughtful question. what I find is the people who are having the most amount of struggle, kind of saying, oh, I want to embrace myself and authenticity, is because at a starting point, they lack self awareness. They don't realize who they are, what they want, what are they doing, how their behavior or activity or tasks or actions are impacting others. There's a lot of lack of self awareness. You see that in least, of course, but you see that at all levels throughout a career, early stage as well as later stage. And first rule of thumb with authenticity is you have to know who you are in order to be true to it, right? And that sounds like such an obvious thing, but people don't actually know. So for example, I would ask people like, hey, is this behavior confidence or ego? Is it, grounded, secure, self-assuredness, or is it showboating? And, I don't use the word arrogance, but I mean, that's basically what I kind of imply. And I say that because for me, for years, I didn't know the difference. I thought I am confident, I'm out there, I'm just a go-getter, and I'm just doing it. And I had deep insecurities. I had deep imposter syndrome. I had a lot of those things that I never brought to the surface because it was easier to just go, go, go and not really think about it because it seemed to be working. My career was going great. But later I started realizing, hey, here my behavior is out of ego to prove to others, to show others, versus this is really what I want to do. And this is motivating and coming more, because the more confidence you have, the more graceful you can be. You can be more generous with others. You can be more inclusive. If you don't have that, and if you're just driven by ego, you're just grabbing, right? This is mine. I'm competing with you. I compare myself to you and I have to win. And just getting to that point of self-awareness, asking yourself some questions of what's motivating me to do this? Why do I even want to go after that for that project?
Yeah.
Is it because I want to learn and grow and challenge myself, or it's because I feel like I'll be left out if I don't do it? Really starting to harness that self-awareness, starting to learn the difference between insecurity and ego versus confidence and self-awareness. That's the starting point, and that's the hardest part. So when I go in and coach people, that's what I really try to do. Ask smart questions, be reflective, write things down. Easy things like, hey, before you respond to that email, take a minute, grab a cup of coffee and just think about it before you, jump to whatever response you want. I think we're so conditioned to be like, squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you're not aggressive, you're losing out. If you're not sprinting, you're going to be left behind. And we're just conditioned to think that way. So it's really about, no, what do I want really? What am I really thinking? What's motivating my actions? And then from that self-awareness, you can start tapping into, okay, who am I really? And what am I really trying to do? Where am I actually at? For me, I was at an executive level that was far beyond what I felt like on the inside. On the inside, I felt like your staff member. On the outside, I had this big title and running a team and running departments. So there was always that disparity. And I think it took me a long time to realize that maybe there's some self-reflection I need to do and some things I need to do to get in touch with who I am so that I can really develop myself and move forward in a positive way.
Yeah, that's a really key point you touched on. That self-awareness is what can be the determining factor, because all self-awareness really is you questioning everything you do, everything you think, initially at least. I'm sure that's what you must do. Other coaches have said the same thing, where if they've got someone who says they're in a bit of a pickle, they're stuck, but then you can tell they're not self-aware. If you tell them, okay, so what do you do when you're angry? Not quite sure. Can't remember the last time I got angry. Okay, what do you do? What do you do when you're with friends? Not quite sure. So that kind of thing, you almost have to tell them, okay, for the next week, I want you to just overanalyze everything. From the point you wake up, everything you're thinking. Are you having a craving to order takeout? Are you thinking, should I walk? Should I cycle to work? Should I drive? All these like little thoughts you have. it all kind of builds that inner picture of you, because everyone's got that outer picture, which they have, like you said, you have that outer picture of I'm an executive, I need to show up. But everyone's got an inner picture that can be different. And often people don't realize what it is. And so I think that self-awareness is a really good point, where as soon as like, and you're starting their coaching, as soon as they've got that thing ticked off, that, okay, now I am analyzing myself, I'm trying to see the weaknesses and the strengths in myself, then you can move on to the next stage, which is like, okay, now that you know who you are, let's figure out how to put that into where you are right now, so you can start being who you are and kind of doing that transition.
Exactly.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. I had this one client who was actually in a management position, and what she would do is she would hear, we're bombarded with quotes. Social media, my social media feed is filled with fun quotes and good quotes and meaningful mantras and things. So she would hear something and she would write it on a sticky note, and she had sticky notes all over her desk, all over her office, of these great mantras and quotes. And I would walk in and I would look at this and I was like, do you like these? I mean, why do you have 50 sticky notes on your monitor? Like, what is this about? But she was doing it because she thought that would help her.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm investing in my development. I'm growing myself, taking in all these wise words. And I was like, just stop this right now. I'm not saying don't have a quote that resonates with you and stick that on, but don't collect them like you're collecting rocks. I mean, this is a key example where someone thinks like, I should be doing this, or this is good for me, and I see other people doing it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, stop. I mean, do what resonates with you and start from there. I'm not saying only do what you want, because then you never grow beyond your own limitations. So you should get out of your comfort zone and stretch and try something new. But do something that might be scary, but deep down that this is what you're supposed to try next.
The right thing to do, yeah. And that's it. We talked about so long ago about the whole thing of like, if you set yourself your goals, and even something that's scary to you, it's going to take you in the right direction, so you can justify taking the action. Whereas there'll be some things that are also scary, but because it not takes you in the right direction, you can justify leaving them and saying no to them. And that's the whole process of not only setting goals, but then also setting boundaries at the same time. What things do I say yes to? What things do I say no to? So now that you've when you started this process of teaching other people, what kind of was that also freelance, or did you after the book, how did writing the book and kind of getting out there, how did that change your entire kind of journey with business? Did that cause you to attract more people, maybe lose some people? How did that happen?
Yeah, so I had my business first, for sure, before the book ever came along. And the book is brand new. It's actually going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. So it's a brand new thing.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm very excited about it. It's my first, hopefully won't be my last. But for me, it was really important to establish my business and have a point of view and a perspective. A lot of people say, I'm a coach, I'm a this, and they're wonderful. There are wonderful, I have a coach myself. There are wonderful coaches out there. But people get intimidated. Like, I want to be a coach. I want to be helping people. How do I even start? How do I build a business around it? And I think the most important thing is have a perspective, have a point of view. For me, I started with my business. I started with the idea to help people, to serve others. I had a very clear idea of the value I brought, so the point of view that I had, and that would attract a certain clientele and repel others. I'm sure others are like, oh, I don't like that point of view, I like that perspective.
Yeah.
So first, I built that, and I built experience and credibility, and really deepened my practice, if you will, and then poured that into the book. And now with this book coming out, most of my clients are happy. They're, worried that they're in the book, and they're not. I have no client stories in the book. These are all from my old corporate life. But I think it has made my approach to my business more rich and more robust, because I feel like I have one more asset that I think is valuable, that I can offer people, and that they can consume at their own time and leisure. And it's a way to reach others who maybe can't are not in a position of taking up coaching services, because it is a luxury to take up coaching services. And this is just a way of getting some of my principles out there without people having to be burdened of signing for additional services themselves.
Wow. Well, the book looks amazing, and after speaking to you, it sounds amazing
Thank
as
you.
well. So, I'm sure people get a lot out of it when they read it. What kind of things do you think you're
Thank
going to
you.
be doing moving forward now in terms of helping other people? Do you have any, big ideas in mind, ambitions, which you think you can really try to change people's lives?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. So I think my business will shift a little bit in the sense that 80% of my base, I always go back to this 80-20 rule, but 80% of my base will be just an expansion of what I have, which are mostly clients in organizations, mostly corporate, for profit, a couple of nonprofit orgs that I'm working with also who are more structured, and them bringing me in to work with their people or their teams and continuing to develop them based on the framework that I've built. The 20% that I want to serve are people who are getting re-entered into professional environments. They might be coming from system challenges like incarceration or something like that. And I want to donate my time and services to help this population that's been really underserved. So that's the 80-20 ratio that I'm working towards. It is like 100% on one side and 0 on the other side right now, or maybe 1 or 2%. But I'm reaching out to some nonprofits to partner with them and to see if I can reach them. And I just want to expand this idea of authenticity doesn't mean hiding who you are. Just because you come from some kind of disadvantaged background, whether it's, hey, I don't have a degree, or I'm coming from a very bad place that I'm trying to claw out of, that's okay. You still are a special, valuable person, and you bring something really important to the table. So that's my vision for the next year or so, and doing more speaking sessions, more interviews, trying to get the word out so that I can continue to sort of propagate my perspective and hopefully help others who are listening that might not have the chance to meet with on a personal basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're located in America, right? So kind of, it sounds like if you're doing a lot of in-person things, does that mean your base is kind of local to where you are? Or are you still reaching out to a lot of people that might be, outside of America or maybe just all over America?
Yes, I do have a global base because a couple of the companies I work with are global.
Nice.
So I do a lot of coaching for people in the UK, for example. I am working with a company that's based in the UK and elsewhere, Asia too. I'm starting to work with more. But I do want to grow that international base as well and reach people virtually. I think on the horizon, some kind of coursework type of, self-paced, recorded thing that people can consume no matter where they are, and having it at different levels and different price points is something that's in the plan. So hopefully that gets developed in the next year as well.
Sounds nice, because the whole point of this, we were talking about self-awareness before, the whole point of this is, Julie can only help so much, but it's up to the client or the person who's getting coached to help themselves. And I think that coursework thing is a thing that people can do at their own pace, and they don't have to have a one-to-one meeting. They can just kind of, it might be a package they download, it might be something that gets sent in the post, it might be a book, it might be a course, whatever it is, they can do at their own pace.
That's right.
And they can work along with it. And then, I'm sure for some people, just that is enough for them to have that kind of, that switch where they're like, okay, I can see where the difference is now. And then for some people, they might be like, I still need a little bit more help. And then that's where they can reach out to you directly and try to get that help that they need.
Yes, absolutely. I think I don't believe in overkill. I think that just in time, just enough is a great way, especially in the earlier days of your career, to get started. I would say, you have to dive in and do the whole package and spend a bunch of money to get help. There are a lot of resources out there, not just my resources, but others, and there are ways to do it. You just have to commit to what you want to learn. Again, don't have just 50 mantras on a sticky note on your monitor. Just figure out what that interests you, that sparks your curiosity, and go find that, because there are resources for you, and build from there.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I mean, as I kind of wrap up, this is it's been such a good conversation, because it's not only have we talked about business, but we've talked about something that's kind of deeper than business. It's about kind of like the person running it and the mind inside that person, in terms of, how much of yourself you put. Loads of people have this front they put up, and multiple fronts. You might be a parent, but at the same time you're a brother, at the same time you're a business manager. Completely different fronts you need for all three of those things, but the person inside is the same. And it's about kind of balancing that act of, what do I do when I'm in business, with that time, place, location kind of method you said, but then it is at the same time, what do I do to make sure what I'm doing when I'm working is not so far different to who I am personally. And it's about finding that nice little middle ground where you're comfortable with who you are, but at the same time putting up this front, and at the same time maybe pushing yourself out your boundary a little bit, just to improve and grow yourself. And it's that balancing act that people struggle with. And I think it's a really good point that you've found this, especially looking at realizing that the middle managers are all told work, work, work. The people at the bottom, people who've just come into work, those 18, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds are told work, 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 work. Only when you get to, let's say you're 60, you're at the, you're 50, you're 60, you're at the top, then you're told, be yourself, relax a little bit. It's like, why do we have that change? Why can we not teach that to the people as soon as they start? Would that not just lead to a more healthy environment in the workplace? And the proper pain point that you figured out, and you're trying to find ways to solve it. Well done on this new book you've got coming out. It's as I said, it looks amazing, and I'm sure when it comes out, there'll be people that read that and they can truly resonate with that, especially stories. They say the best way to get to someone is to relate with them, and this is scientifically proven. I told someone else before as well, but it was like, I think they did a study, and just to prove just how much relation matters, they did a study where they had people in a conversation, right? And I think it was a conversation. It's like a difficult conversation, or conversation where you're trying to sell something like that, where you need to build a bond. They got in one half, they got them to just do it normally. In the other half, they told them, we need you to manually yawn. We need you to just yawn on purpose at some point. And they found out that as soon as someone yawned, immediately the other person bonded with them. There was a higher success rate of completing this task, because a yawn shows vulnerability. You as a front, right, are showing, oh, look at me, I'm a powerful business person. As soon as you yawn, the other person's like, yeah, I get tired as well sometimes. I understand. Immediately a relation is born.
I love that.
So makes sense.
I love that. Yeah, I think that balancing point, it's like a Bosu ball. If you've ever tried to stand on a Bosu ball, you never just stand on it still. There's always that teetering, tottering, and that'll never go away. You just get better at it. And you can maybe, get to a point where you reach balance faster, maybe can hold your balance a little longer. But I don't want people to think like, oh, there's that nirvana state reach where I'm just going to be stable and balanced all the time. There's always going to be something that throws you off. And that's okay. That's just reality. That's just life. But exactly as you said, Krishna, who you are as a person is who you are as a person, regardless of all the different roles that you play. And who you are as a person is so important and so special. And that's what people want to see. That's what you want to bring into the world. So I say, let your light shine, and don't be afraid of the challenges. And when you fall off the bossy ball, it's okay. You just have to get back up and get back on it.
Amazing. As I said, it's very, very nice and fresh to hear something like this. It's very different to the normal hustle culture we see being told. We see it in speaking events, we see it in networking events, we see it in social media. We've all seen that kind of social media guy who's like, oh, I've got a Lamborghini behind me, that's because I worked hard for 10 years. It's the power of someone like that is so much that we need people who kind of counter it and say, be yourself as well at times.
Yes.
Finally, Julie, as a final question, kind of, if you had to look back on yourself, when you do feel you were in that, whenever that time was when you felt like you were getting pushed around, you were, a reed in the wind, just conforming to other people, what kind of advice would you give, one sentence that would make you maybe rethink the way you live your life and change it for the better?
Yeah, what I would tell myself back then, if I could go back then and talk to myself at that point, would be just breathe, don't white knuckle it, you're okay. You're here for a reason. They chose you for a reason. You're not an imposter. It's okay. Just let go, relax. Just be who you are. Be what you want to be, and everything will follow. So no
Amazing.
white knuckling it.
Amazing. Well, Julie, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Krishna, thank you. Oh, it's been great.
Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much. They can just go to my website. It's Julee Sung, JuleeSung.com.
Amazing. Again, thank you so much for coming on. You shared some amazing insights. And, once this book comes out, maybe in a year's time, we can have another podcast episode just to see kind of how it's going on, how that's changed your entire business journey.
I would love that, Krishna. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I really thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and to speak with all your listeners.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. So I've ended the recording. How was that?
It was great. You're so awesome. I knew you were awesome because I've listened to other episodes, but yeah, it was so great talking to you. Thank you for making this so easy.
No, thank you, because I can only try as much as I can to kind of keep it open, but I appreciate you opening up, sharing so nicely, and giving some really serious advice. As much as people say this is all kind of on a podcast, but some of this advice can be life-changing for that one person who needs to hear it. And that's why I always think, before I started the podcast, I used to think coaches, there's just hundreds of them. What difference are they doing? There's just so many of them. That's me, bang on my head. I shouldn't have thought like that. But now after listening to them, I realize just if you're going to have a population that's so diverse, you need to have an equal amount of coaches that are that diverse. So it makes sense why you have coaches from all walks of life, all ethnicities, all career roles. They're coming together and they're trying to solve collective problems that people will genuinely have. Everyone needs help at some point. And, the way I kind of picture it is I heard from somewhere, which was, initially a coach might think that, oh, I shouldn't charge for my services. I don't deserve to get paid for my story. But then the way the other person rephrased it was, instead of think of it as you getting paid for your story, think of it as, does the other person deserve for me to teach them? Does the other person deserve for me to improve their life? And more often than not, the answer will be yes. And that's really what a coach is doing, is just changing someone else's life for the better. So
yeah, I love it. I think it's an investment of time and energy on the coach's part, and imparting knowledge, of course. But from the person getting the coaching, whether virtually or through a podcast or any of those things, money may or may not involve, but they're investing in their own growth, right?
Yeah.
They're taking the time and energy and maybe spending money, maybe not. But, to listen to a 15-minute podcast is not nothing. I mean, that is an investment and that's important, but they're getting something from it. And it's such an important act of sort of self-love and self-investment, to say, hey, I'm worth this time. I'm going to take this time to listen to Krishna's podcast because I learned something from it. And that's so important. So you're doing something that's really terrific, that really helps people.
Amazing. Well, those words mean a lot, Julie. Thank you so much. This episode will be, I think the turnaround is around 3 to 4 weeks, if that's okay. Sure. I can do it quicker. When is your book coming out?
It's coming out around June 15th-ish, so timing should be really good.
That should be okay. Do you want it to come out? Yeah. Do you want this to come out before the book, or do you want this to come out like a little bit after the book?
It doesn't matter. It's whatever timing works for you.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay. Well, I'll keep you updated. And I was truthfully saying, once the book is out, once you've done something else, then in a year's time, sure, we can talk again and see what changes have happened and kind of how many people you've been able to help.
Yes, I would love to speak again. Yes, this has been so great. And I'm so grateful for everything that you. Thank you so much.